Chosen one. There comes a moment in your life when something inside you changes in a way that cannot be reversed. You stop performing for people. You stop adjusting your personality just to maintain comfort in rooms where truth was never welcome. You begin living honestly with your values, your boundaries, and the direction God is guiding you toward. At first, the shift may feel quiet and personal, something happening deep within your own heart and mind. But what you soon discover is that authenticity does not remain private for long. The moment you begin living in truth, the environment around you starts responding in ways you did not expect. Conversations that once felt easy begin feeling different. People who once seemed comfortable around you start behaving in unfamiliar ways. Some grow distant. Others react with subtle tension or criticism. The chosen one often finds this confusing at first because you may not feel like you have done anything wrong.
In reality, the change is not about conflict. It is about contrast. Authenticity naturally creates contrast in environments where pretense once existed. When everyone around you is participating in a quiet system of appearances, the person who chooses honesty becomes noticeable. The shift does not happen because you are trying to expose anyone. It happens simply because you stopped pretending. When the chosen one begins living in truth, the atmosphere changes. Suddenly, the patterns that once seemed normal start revealing themselves more clearly. Conversations built on gossip feel uncomfortable. Agreements based on silent compromise begin feeling heavy. Environments where people hide behind roles and expectations start losing their appeal. What once felt like belonging begins feeling like performance. This transformation is not something you planned to create. It is a natural result of growth.
God often works within a person's heart first, reshaping the way they see themselves and the world around them. When that internal transformation happens, the external environment eventually begins reacting to it. The chosen one may notice that people who once connected easily now seem uncertain about how to interact with you. Some individuals who relied on masks or manipulation begin feeling exposed without anyone directly confronting them. Your presence alone becomes a mirror that reflects the difference between authenticity and performance. This reflection creates discomfort for those who are not ready to examine their own behavior. As a result, the reactions you see around you may vary. Some people quietly distance themselves without explanation. Others may respond with criticism, suggesting that you have changed too much or that your new boundaries feel unnecessary. A few may even attempt to pull you back into the old patterns that once defined the environment.
But beneath these reactions lies the same underlying truth. Authentic living disrupts spaces that depend on silent compromise. The chosen one eventually realizes that this disruption is not a mistake. It is part of what happens when truth enters environments built on appearances. Scripture often emphasizes that God values truth within the inner life of a person. When someone aligns their life with honesty and integrity, the clarity created by that decision begins revealing the reality of the environment around them. Relationships that once seemed stable begin showing whether they were built on authenticity or convenience. Conversations that once felt natural reveal whether they were grounded in honesty or performance. For the chosen one, this stage of the journey can feel both freeing and unsettling at the same time. You may feel relief because you are no longer pretending to be someone you are not.
Yet you may also feel uncertainty as relationships begin shifting in ways you did not anticipate. People who once felt close may now appear distant. Familiar environments may start feeling less comfortable than they once were. In these moments, it is important to remember that the change did not begin around you. It began within you. God was reshaping your understanding of truth, identity, and purpose long before the reactions of others appeared. The tension you now observe is simply the visible result of that internal transformation. The chosen one learns that authenticity does not destroy relationships that are genuine. Instead, it reveals which connections were real and which were sustained only by silent agreement. The people who valued honesty will remain steady as your life continues changing. But those who depended on the old system of appearances may gradually step away because the environment no longer supports the roles they once played.
What feels like disruption in this moment is actually clarity. God is allowing the contrast between truth and pretense to become visible so that your path can move forward without confusion. And although the shift may feel uncomfortable at first, it marks the beginning of a life that is no longer built on performance, but on the quiet strength of authenticity. Chosen one, once authenticity begins reshaping the way you live, another quiet shift starts unfolding in the environment around you. At first, the change may seem subtle. Conversations feel slightly different. Certain people interact with you less frequently. The tone of familiar relationships begins to shift in ways that are difficult to explain. Over time, however, the pattern becomes clearer. The spaces and relationships that once depended on silent participation begin losing their stability the moment you stop playing along. Force environments are rarely sustained by one person alone. They function because everyone involved participates in the illusion, often without openly acknowledging it. People pretend not to notice certain behaviors. They avoid speaking about uncomfortable truths. They follow expectations that were never clearly stated but are quietly understood by everyone involved. This unspoken agreement creates a fragile balance where appearances remain intact as long as no one disrupts the system. The chosen one often becomes the disruption simply by choosing honesty. When you begin setting clear boundaries, speaking with sincerity, or refusing to support patterns that no longer align with your values, the balance of that environment begins to shift. You may not even be trying to challenge anyone. You may simply be living according to the growth God has been developing inside you. Yet that alone can create tension within systems that depend on silent agreement. The reason is simple. Pretending systems require participation from everyone. The moment one person refuses to participate, the illusion becomes harder to maintain. People who once relied on the shared silence suddenly become aware that the structure around them is less stable than before. The chosen one's authenticity introduces clarity, and clarity has a way of revealing what some people would rather keep hidden. This does not mean you are confronting or exposing anyone directly. Often, your presence alone becomes enough to create discomfort. Someone who once felt comfortable manipulating situations may now feel uneasy around someone who values honesty. Someone who relied on gossip or subtle control may begin feeling exposed when standing next to someone who no longer participates in those behaviors. Instead of addressing the deeper issue, many people simply choose distance. They withdraw quietly, rather than adapting to the new atmosphere created by authenticity. The chosen one may notice that conversations become shorter and interactions less frequent. Invitations may gradually disappear. Some individuals who once seemed friendly begin acting distant without explanation. At first, this may feel confusing. You may wonder if you said something wrong or unintentionally created conflict. But over time, you begin recognizing that the change did not come from hostility. It came from clarity. Authenticity has a way of dissolving relationships that depended on illusions. When the illusion disappears, the connection often loses the foundation that once held it together. Scripture frequently describes truth as a form of light. Light does not need to argue with darkness in order to create change. Its presence alone reveals what was previously hidden. When someone begins walking in truth, the environment naturally adjusts around them. Some people move closer to the light because they value honesty and growth. Others step away because the clarity feels uncomfortable for them. The chosen one gradually understands that this reaction is not rejection in the traditional sense. It is a response to the shift in energy created by authenticity. People who benefit from illusions often struggle to remain comfortable around someone who no longer participates in them. The contrast between truth and pretense becomes too visible to ignore. Instead of adapting, many simply remove themselves from the situation. While this transition can feel lonely in the moment, it carries an important purpose. God often allows these shifts to occur so that your life becomes aligned with environments that support your growth rather than resist it. The people who quietly withdraw are not always meant to walk with you into the next stage of your journey. Their presence belonged to a chapter that existed before your transformation became visible. When authenticity becomes part of your daily life, the chosen one begins learning that not every relationship is designed to remain permanent. Some connections existed only within the environment of who you used to be. Once God reshapes your identity and direction, those connections naturally lose their place in the new chapter of your life. Instead of forcing those relationships to remain, you begin allowing the transition to unfold naturally. The distance that once felt uncomfortable slowly begins revealing its deeper purpose. God is clearing space in your environment so that your life can move forward without the weight of false expectations. And as the old balance dissolves, the chosen one begins discovering that authenticity does not isolate you. It simply removes what was never real enough to remain once truth entered the room. Chosen one. After the initial disruption and the gradual distance created by authenticity, another realization begins to emerge with time. What once felt like loss slowly reveals itself as alignment. At first, the departure of certain people from your life may feel confusing or even painful. Relationships that once seemed stable suddenly fade without clear explanations. Conversations that once felt routine disappear. Familiar connections begin dissolving in ways that leave you questioning what happened. But as the process continues, the chosen one begins recognizing that something deeper is unfolding beneath the surface. God is not simply allowing people to leave your life randomly. He is using authenticity as a tool to reshape your environment. When a person begins living honestly, the relationships around them naturally reveal their true foundation. Some connections were built on shared growth, mutual respect, and genuine understanding. Others, however, were sustained by compromise, silent expectations, or the roles people played around each other. When authenticity enters the equation, those roles can no longer survive in the same way they once did. The chosen one begins realizing that some relationships were never built on the real version of who you are becoming. They were connected to the earlier version of you, the one who tolerated certain patterns in order to maintain peace or belonging. In those earlier seasons, compromise may have felt easier than confrontation. Silence may have seemed more comfortable than honesty. But as God reshapes your perspective, the things you once accepted quietly begin feeling out of place. The chosen one no longer feels comfortable participating in environments where truth must be hidden in order to maintain harmony. As this shift becomes visible, relationships that depended on that earlier version of you begin losing their stability. The distance that follows is not always dramatic. Often it happens gradually, almost quietly. Someone stops reaching out as often. Invitations become less frequent. Conversations become shorter and less meaningful. At first, it may appear as though people are simply becoming busy or distracted. But over time, the pattern reveals something deeper. The connection itself was sustained by conditions that no longer exist. When those conditions disappear, the relationship slowly dissolves as well. For the chosen one, this stage of the journey can feel lonely at times. There may be moments when the silence left behind by departing relationships feels heavy. You may look around and realize that the circle of people around you has grown smaller than it once was. But this reduction does not mean your life is becoming emptier. In many ways, it means your environment is becoming clearer. When God begins cleaning your circle, He is removing connections that were built on expectations rather than authenticity. Relationships that required you to shrink your values or ignore your growth gradually lose their place in your life. What remains is space. Space for peace, space for clarity, and space for connections that can grow without compromise. The chosen one eventually begins noticing that the emotional tension once present in certain relationships begins fading as those connections disappear. Conversations become simpler, because you no longer feel the need to manage conflicting expectations. Your thoughts become clearer because the pressure to perform for others is no longer part of your daily life. The atmosphere around you begins feeling calmer, even if the number of people around you has temporarily decreased. Scripture often shows that God reshapes environments as part of preparing someone for their purpose. Sometimes that preparation includes removing people who cannot grow alongside the path He is guiding you toward. These removals are not punishments. They are forms of protection and alignment. God understands that certain relationships, if left unchanged, could slow down or distort the direction He is leading you toward. By allowing authenticity to reveal which connections were conditional, He clears the path for healthier relationships to form later. The chosen one gradually learns to trust this process instead of resisting it. You begin realizing that not every person who walks beside you during one season is meant to remain for the entire journey. Some individuals are part of earlier chapters that help shape your growth, but were never meant to continue into the next stage. Accepting this truth allows you to release those connections without bitterness. Instead of seeing their departure as rejection, you begin recognizing it as divine alignment. God is reorganizing the environment around your life so that your future can unfold without the confusion of false relationships. And as this process continues, the chosen one begins experiencing a different kind of clarity. The circle around you may be smaller for a time, but it becomes far more peaceful. Without the noise of expectations and the pressure of pretending, your life begins moving forward with a calm stability that was impossible when the environment around you was still filled with illusions. Through authenticity, God is quietly cleaning your circle, making room for a future built not on roles or compromise, but on truth. Chosen one, after the distance, the quiet departures, and the gradual reshaping of your circle, something unexpected begins to appear in your life. At first, it is subtle, almost easy to overlook. The tension that once surrounded certain environments starts fading. The mental exhaustion that came from managing expectations slowly disappears. The need to constantly monitor what you say, how you act, or how others might interpret your decisions begins losing its grip. In its place, a quiet peace starts forming. This peace does not arrive suddenly like a dramatic change. It grows slowly as the environment around you becomes more aligned with the truth you are now living in. For a long time, the chosen one may have felt the invisible pressure of maintaining balance in relationships that required compromise. You may have carefully chosen words to avoid conflict. You may have tolerated behaviors that felt uncomfortable simply to preserve harmony. You may have adjusted your boundaries so that others would continue feeling comfortable around you. At the time, these adjustments may have seemed necessary for maintaining connection. But over time, they created an atmosphere where authenticity required effort rather than freedom. Once those environments begin dissolving, the difference becomes noticeable. The chosen one suddenly realizes that life feels lighter. Conversations no longer require constant caution. You do not need to rehearse your thoughts before expressing them. You no longer feel the pressure to shrink your values in order to maintain someone else's comfort. The emotional energy once spent navigating those expectations becomes available for something far more meaningful: clarity. Clarity changes the way you move through your daily life. Without the noise of conflicting expectations surrounding you, your mind becomes calmer. Decisions become simpler because they are no longer influenced by the fear of disappointing people who expected a version of you that no longer exists. The chosen one begins acting from a place of internal alignment rather than external pressure. This internal stability gradually shapes the atmosphere around you as well. Environments that value honesty and mutual respect begin feeling more natural. Conversations with the right people feel easier because there is no hidden performance involved. You can express your thoughts without filtering them through layers of expectation. The peace that develops in this stage is not the absence of challenges. Life still presents obstacles, responsibilities, and moments of uncertainty. But the difference lies in the absence of constant emotional conflict. When authenticity becomes the foundation of your life, your energy is no longer divided between truth and performance. Everything begins aligning in the same direction. The chosen one often realizes that what once felt like loss was actually relief. The relationships that faded away may have carried emotional tension you had grown accustomed to over time. When those connections disappear, the absence of that tension reveals how heavy the environment once was. You begin noticing how calm your mind feels without certain conversations, certain expectations, or certain dynamics surrounding you. Scripture often connects truth with freedom. When a person aligns their life with honesty and integrity, the result is not isolation, but peace. God's guidance leads people toward environments where authenticity does not require constant defense. Instead, it becomes the natural way of existing. This peace also changes the way the chosen one views the past. Instead of feeling regret for the relationships that ended, you begin understanding the role they played in your journey. Those environments helped shape your awareness of what authenticity truly means. They showed you the difference between connections built on appearance and connections built on truth. Without those experiences, the clarity you now carry might never have developed in the same way. Over time, the calm stability that emerges from this shift becomes one of the greatest signs of growth. The chosen one no longer feels pulled in multiple directions by competing expectations. Your identity becomes grounded in the values God has been shaping within you. The environment around you becomes quieter, not because life has become empty, but because the unnecessary noise has been removed. In this quieter space, peace becomes easier to recognize, and that peace becomes a foundation that supports everything else in your life moving forward. Chosen one. After the disruption, the distance, and the quiet peace that follows the clearing of your environment, another shift begins unfolding, in a way you may not immediately notice. The same authenticity that once pushed certain people away begins drawing new people toward you. At first, this happens slowly, almost quietly, as if the world around you is gradually adjusting to the person you have become. When you began living honestly, it may have felt as though your circle was shrinking. Conversations became fewer, relationships changed, and moments of solitude appeared more often than before. But what seemed like isolation was never the final destination of your journey. It was a transition that prepared the environment around you for something different. Authentic living has a natural filtering effect. It removes connections that depended on illusion, but it also creates a signal that others who value truth can recognize. The chosen one begins noticing that the people who now appear in your life feel different from those who once surrounded you. These new connections do not require the same performance or silent compromise that once defined your earlier relationships. Conversations with them feel natural because they are not built on pretending. You do not feel pressure to shrink your thoughts or soften your values to maintain comfort. Instead, there is a quiet understanding between people who recognize authenticity when they see it. These relationships rarely form quickly. Unlike connections based on convenience or shared habits, authentic relationships grow slowly. Trust develops through observation rather than immediate familiarity. The chosen one learns to appreciate this slower pace because it allows the foundation of the relationship to become strong before expectations are built around it. Over time, these connections reveal a deeper level of stability. Instead of being sustained by appearances, they are sustained by shared values. Honesty becomes the center of communication. Mutual respect replaces silent competition. Growth becomes something that both sides support rather than resist. This shift changes the way the chosen one views relationships entirely. Earlier in life, belonging may have been defined by how easily you could fit into the expectations of a group. But after authenticity reshapes your path, belonging begins looking very different. It no longer depends on numbers or popularity. Instead, it depends on alignment. The people who remain close to you now share a similar respect for truth, growth, and integrity. Because of this alignment, These relationships require far less effort to maintain.
You do not need to constantly explain yourself, because your values already resonate with theirs. You do not need to hide parts of your journey, because they understand the importance of personal growth. Even silence can feel comfortable, because the connection is not dependent on constant reassurance. The chosen one begins realizing that genuine relationships carry a kind of stability that performance-based connections never had. When authenticity becomes your foundation, the people who remain in your life are those who value that same honesty within themselves. They are not threatened by your growth, because they are committed to growth in their own lives as well. These individuals often appear gradually, rather than all at once. God aligns relationships according to purpose and timing. The people who are meant to walk beside you in the next chapter of your life often arrive when your identity has become strong enough to recognize them clearly.
If they had appeared earlier, the connection might have been influenced by the same illusions that once surrounded your life. But now, because authenticity has reshaped your perspective, you can recognize the difference between real connection and temporary convenience. Scripture often shows that God brings the right people into a person's life at the moment when alignment is possible. These relationships are not formed through pressure or performance. They appear naturally when someone walks faithfully in truth. The chosen one begins understanding that the same authenticity which once caused discomfort in certain environments now becomes the very quality that attracts the right people. Those who value honesty recognize it immediately. Those who respect integrity are drawn toward it without needing explanation. Over time, the environment around your life begins reflecting the values you now carry within yourself. Conversations feel more meaningful. Relationships feel more balanced.
Opportunities appear through people who appreciate authenticity rather than expect compromise. What once felt like isolation reveals itself as alignment. The chosen one learns that living in truth does not reduce connection, it refines connection, so that the relationships that remain are real. And in that refinement, God replaces the noise of false relationships with the quiet strength of genuine ones that can walk beside you into the future. Chosen one. If you have walked through seasons where people slowly drifted away as you began living more honestly, understand that this was never a sign that something was wrong with you. In many cases, it was a sign that something was finally right. When God begins transforming a person from the inside, authenticity becomes impossible to hide. You start valuing truth more than approval, peace more than performance, and purpose more than fitting into environments that were never built for the person you are becoming. That shift naturally changes the atmosphere around your life. Some relationships cannot survive when the roles that once sustained them disappear. People who are comfortable with the earlier version of you may feel uncertain about the new clarity you carry. But this transition is not meant to punish you or isolate you. It is part of the process God uses to align your life with what truly belongs in it. When false connections leave, they create space for something far more meaningful to appear. Authentic relationships, environments built on honesty, and opportunities that match your growth can only enter your life when the noise of compromise has been removed. The peace you feel after the shift is not accidental. It is the result of a life that is no longer divided between who you truly are and who others expected you to be. God often clears environments before He expands them, ensuring that the foundation of your future is built on truth rather than illusion. If this message resonated with you and reflected something you have experienced on your journey, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who may be walking through the same kind of transition. And if you want to hear more messages created for the chosen ones learning to walk boldly in the purpose God has placed on their lives, make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay connected for the next message.